Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. I hope everyone is having a great start of your day. We have a new system in place here, so let's see how this all works out. Why does it not look like it is showing up here? It says we are live. Give me 1 second just to see if this is showing up right. Don't want to do all this for nothing. Oh, there it goes. I see it working now. Okay. Well, welcome Quasar Markets Live. You've got your host, Howard Greenberg, here today this morning. Big Beat is in Japan, kicking off the Quasar Markets Japanese version. So we will hear from him now and again and give you updates on what he has going on there. Hope everybody likes our new setup here. Big news this morning has been, of course, the jobs number. They showed a big increase, moved up very nicely, but that has been destroying the markets since that news, as you can see here. That big drop down right at 830 from that 514 level all the way down as far as 508 before we saw a little bit of a move back to the upside. We were down slightly on the day, I'm not going to lie, but now down almost a full percentage point here on QQQ. SPY holding up a little bit better and recovering a little bit quicker, but not really. That took Bitcoin down again. Bitcoin had been up around 95K, recovered back to 95 or so, and that has quickly pretty much moved that back down also. So something to keep an eye on there. Gold has been a beneficiary of this news. It did take off on the news. And what really took off, though, unfortunately, is rates. You can see here that the 30-year moved from that 4.93 area, even as low as 4.91 overnight, and briefly broke above the 5 handle again, and the 10-year getting hit even higher. When I say that by a percentage point, the 10-year up 1.62% here, moving all the way from 4.67 to 4.788 before pulling back a little bit here. I will point out one of the things that Stephen Flanagan, our man, Mr. Currency, keeps pointing out for us is the fact that, hey, good morning, Mr. Flanagan. How do you like our new setup there, buddy? But you can see these big moves in the bond market immediately upon that employment rate news. And the same thing, DXY shot up immediately on the news, briefly broke almost to 110 again, but settling down in this 109.966, which we can see is the new 52-week high here. So we do have, definitely some volatility here this morning. I will try to get some information from our man, Paul Valleja, on what is going on in the job market. Again, he is the CEO of Capital Hire, one of the largest, one of the largest employment search firms in the U.S., especially out of D.C. and New York. And he will give us a little bit more breakdown into these numbers. But, I'm not buying them right now. What it does say is higher for longer. Rates are definitely nowhere. And I did see right on the move that the Fed watch had moved to like 95% of no cuts until like July. So definitely putting a hamper on the markets so far. We have to talk, obviously, about the wildfires hitting LA. Those folks are definitely in our prayers. But the bigger news to the stock market there is we've seen a few things. Number one, it has home builders like Lennar. We're moving well to the upside. It does look like here now that is pulled back here again at that 8:30 news when everything else pulled back. We're seeing some pullbacks here. So my information that I put together at 8:15 today now pretty much, useless in certain circumstances. But we had seen home builders moving to the upside. We have seen a big move up by Constellation Energy. and that is on the news that their acquisition of Calpine, I believe, is the name of the company, right? That they are purchasing Calpine, which is one of the largest clean energy providers in the U.S. And when it comes to natural gas. So they are talking about spending $26.6 billion, including the assumption of debt for the privately held Calpine. It values Calpine at about a multiple of 7.9 times its 2026 enterprise value to EBITDA, or earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. We have seen the big move up here by Constellation, about 13, almost 14% here this morning on that news. Constellation, as we already know, is the largest operator of nuclear plants. Now you start to add in this, natural energy, and they are definitely putting themselves in a good spot, in my opinion, here, to succeed under whoever whatever the energy czar is wanting to do, whether it be the Trump administration or the one following. Constellation Energy is going to be at the forefront of it here. We know that they are, one of the ones in talks of building more SMRs, which are small to medium-sized reactors for nuclear energy. Also, they do expect this to close within 12 months. And the other interesting part I saw is that it does expect to add about $2 in earnings per share to their bottom line. The other one that moving up tremendously here today is Walgreens. Walgreens, which we know, and I've talked about this with Steve. When it gapped down here, I started to ask, was this a buy in that 12 area? Luckily, I did not buy it in that 12 area as it moved down to 8. And, even right now, only up at 1069 on the nice 16% move up here after earnings. And if we look at their earnings, they had a nice beat on EPS of about 8.85%, and even a nicer beat on revenue. So top line revenue and EPS looking better for Walgreens so far. And what it is it's showing that some of their turnaround progress is working. Walgreens got hit really hard in major cities. They had a huge amount of inner city stores that were facing some of these problems with theft and so forth, and they had closed a bunch. But the results, said the CEO, reflect their disciplined execution against their 2025 priorities, which are stabilizing the retail pharmacy by optimizing our footprint, controlling operating costs, improving cash flow, and continuing to address reimbursement models. Their CEO said in remarks, I will tell you from my work at ABCA, we have tried to work with Medicare and some of the other, U.S. departments on remittances, trying to speed that up through the use of blockchain. So would be nice if they could get that going. Good to see Walgreens, moving up for sure in that. The other thing that's been moving up today, I've noticed, is airlines. Haven't seen a ton of news on why airlines would be moving to the upside here this morning. Although, actually, I can tell you why. Delta had earnings reports. So we had a nice beat by Delta's earnings. I did not see that this morning, but they had earnings this morning. It looks like they had a beat both on the top line revenue and on the EPS also. So definitely one to keep an eye on here. With that, UAL was up nicely on that news. Also, they run into earnings, I believe, tomorrow. Their earnings is, not for a few days. But UAL had moved up nicely on that news. Same thing, Southwest even, Love up about 2.7% on that news. We'll say a sympathy play on Constellation also is Vista Corp, one of the big nuclear players in the space, and they're up about 2.15%. This morning. Again, a lot of the energy companies getting some win today. Devon Energy up over 2%, Occidental up over 2%. So we do see that. On the downside, obviously, insurance, based upon what's going on in California with the wildfires, we see a lot of the insurance companies getting hit here this morning. Allstate down about 3.36%. Travelers Insurance down about 3.2%. Chubb Limited down about 2 and change. AIG. So all of them, moving to the downside. We did see a downgrade on AMD, the chip manufacturer. That does have them moving to the downside. Also here, I actually start to get interested on AMD down here at this level. So AMD is one that I actually think is starting to get to an interesting spot. If we can look, we've retested pretty much this bottom here at 118. If we get a little bit of a hold here, AMD for me might be a play to the upside. I like the mean reversion on some of these. That could be one. Also had earnings come out from Constellation Brands, one of the largest beverage companies out there, wine and beer, the people who bring you Modelo and Corona and other things, along with a huge amount of wine. They had an earnings miss. EPS was down. They were expecting to do about 331 a share, did 325. And then a bigger miss on the top side. Revenue, we're looking for 2.53 billion, was down about 2.46. I did have a little bit of feedback from your CEO here on that. And that is Bill Netherlands, their CEO. He cited near-term uncertainty on whether consumers will revert to more normalized spending. Again, the wine and spirits business has been a little bit under fire as we've seen the growth of the cannabis business sort of build into that, and a movement towards, sober. I saw Wall Street Journal had a huge article last couple of days about all of the places in New York City that are providing these sober alternatives to going to bars. I always wonder if it's a fad or not. It happened for a little bit in DC back a couple of years ago, and they quickly, went out of business. It takes a lot to sort of change even though people might not want to drink as much, they still sort of want the atmosphere that comes in that actual bar versus those sober sort of businesses. In fact, most of the ones they showed were what I would call sort of nerd related. They were, one place that people were going was, painting figurines. Another one was, a lot of them were like sip and paint type things, crafts and things like that there. So we'll see. Constellation, again, huge wine company, huge beer company, and they definitely are one of the ones to keep an eye on for that industry. I didn't look to see if it has Brown-Forman moving one way or the other here. Give me 1 second. I keep them on this. It does have Brown-Forman moving to the downside. So it looks like it's going to bring a bunch of the, the booze and liquor company, beer companies to the downside today. As we start to get ready to open up here, we're about 13 minutes away from the open. Looks like 9 out of the 11 sectors in the spider are opening to the downside. Only things opening to the upside so far, energy select sector, as we know, that has been led here, as we talked about, by Constellation, and then keeping it in similar sector, utilities also slightly in the green. We'll point out that overseas markets not performing too well overnight either. The stock's down about 0.2 of a percentage point here today. That is after a nice move up. The stocks had been down as far as, 496 here. It's made a nice nice reversal here back up to that 515 area. So the stocks has made a nice move up here over the last, 15 days since about December 19th when it bottomed out. So maybe we'll ask Mr. Flanagan what he's thinking there. And then overseas, the Shanghai, which has been continuing to move to the downside actually here. Looks like it wants to fill the gap even down to the 200-day MA. So the Shanghai not holding up as well here. And again, if you feel like that there is going to be a stimulus package coming out sometime soon here, this could be one. Take a look maybe at MSCI there. Asia Fund would be maybe a play there. And the Nikkei down about 1% overnight here. This one has been more of a range trading personally than moving in one direction here. But the Nikkei down about a point today. Natural gas now at 412 on natural gas. So huge move up by natural gas here again. It starts to get to the spots. I will say, Steve keeps pointing out to me that if we get up towards that 450 again, he'd be looking to short natural gas. It's got about a 6% move to the upside today. I want to see if it does a nice continuation, ends up about 10% today. Again, that could be a mean reversion towards the end of the day, maybe a play on UNG there that we could take a look at. Gold looks like it's trying to get back above 2,700 here. So gold is moving to the upside. Bitcoin, after moving back down on that news, has nicely recovered all the way back up to 94,400 here. So it's showing a little bit of resilience here. And we are seeing that across the markets. We are seeing that, again, this is what we talked about with electronic trading and the immediate reaction we see to news, data points. Look at that move down. And now it's just slowly grinding its way back up towards that point. Again, those that have a strong stomach, you can definitely play these off of these data points, but, you have to have the conviction and the will to do it because it will scare you for a little bit. What else was I looking at here today for movers and shakers? Those were really the big industries, big things I was looking at. Mag 7 as we're getting ready to open here. Again, Mag 7 getting beat up here across the board, all 7 of them looking to open to the downside. NVIDIA here now below 140 rather here, right around 137.09. So we are definitely still seeing weakness here in NVIDIA. I am in a trade there at 142.50 for a longer term play. Steve's in at a higher spot there. That is the only trade that we are currently in here. Crypto will say alts are moving to the upside today. So after pulling back over the last couple of days, crypto seems to be getting a little bit of win here today, led by some of the smaller meme coins. Doge up about 3.49%, Cardano up almost 4%, Pepe up about 4%. And, I got to say, XLM has been trying to make a move here. And I do think break above that 50-day MA makes it interesting there on XLM, which, as we know, is used for cross-border payments. So that's what I'm seeing so far. We are about 8 minutes from the open here today. Again, biggest news on the day has been employment numbers. And with that, we see the 30-year had broke above 5, now down a little bit below it again. Other big news so far this morning, let's see if it's moving their stock, is the sports consortium of Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers that were looking to combine to create that Venue, I believe was the name of it, right? Venue Sports. They have decided to end that relationship. And with that, we actually see a move to the upside by Disney here. Makes sense that Disney would be the winner in this, as their merger with Fubo would leave them still in a good spot to be the dominant player sort of in that sports offering there. Let's take a look and see what it's doing for Fox and Warner. Yep, Fox down a little bit there on that news. And then Warner Brothers, Discovery, down even more because they would be the ones to get hurt. I sort of agree with that. So for once, the market seems to be digesting this news in a way that sort of makes sense. Disney with their merger with Fubo sort of in the driver's seat. As we know, Disney owns ESPN. There, whereas Fox, Warner Brothers, Discovery, smaller shares of the sporting market, sort of needed the largeness that new Venue was going to bring to kind of take and capitalize and maximize their profits on their sports franchises. So that's definitely, to me, was some of the bigger news here this morning. T-Mobile, we talked about T-Mobile, which is T-Bus, right? Nope, I always get that wrong. T-Mus, that's it. I saw a big insider buy there. Where was it? Andre Almeida, who is one of the directors in the company on their wireless side, picked up about $1 million worth of stock here in December. So one that I'm sort of looking at here, it's been beat up pretty badly throughout the whole month of December. In fact, I think it hit its December high on December 1st before pulling all the way back down here to this 211 area. Had been as high as 250. So we are seeing a pretty big insider buy there. I'm also seeing it looks like they might have a little bit of news. You do see some analysts saying UBS saying it's a good time to buy it too. So T Mus one there. If you're looking at a entry rate for T-Mobile, this could be a good spot there. And I always love when there's some insider buying within the stock. The big news as we were leaving on if I can remember the days. Today's what? Today is Friday, it's Wednesday here. Nvidia and especially the CEO Jensen there had come out and really moved to the downside all of the quantum computing stocks. We saw Rigetti. RGTI, right? Yeah. We had seen Rigetti move far to the downside, down, 45%, bouncing back a little bit here this morning. But, some of these quantum computing, if you're looking something, I love the way this looks on the dollar, double bottom here on the hourly chart here, right? Got a nice little double bottom. If we can tap here at this $9, definitely becomes an interesting spot here, maybe for an entry. Again, if I'm getting into these quantum computing names, though, I'm looking for just a quick pump on them. These would be day trading names more than, acquisitions for a longer term hold. Part of that is just about the fact that we are far away from quantum computing, as the CEO of NVIDIA mentioned. His comment was, if your time horizon for quantum computing to really, sort of take footprint is 15 years, you're probably too optimistic. And if it's 30 years, you're probably not optimistic enough. So we'll see how that does play out. Other big news, you got to talk a little bit about TikTok, right? And ByteDance and what's going on there. That sort of is still moving on its way to the Supreme Court. I have seen some changes within the platform itself, people trying to move off the platform, different things popping up there for, ways that they want you to prove that you are a human versus a bot nowadays. So, to me, it looks like all of a sudden, it reminded me a lot of what I saw in the crypto space. When they really went after Coinbase and Binance, we saw a lot of the other smaller exchanges all of a sudden started to get people to try to prove that they, where they were citizens of, so that they knew which laws they should be and which taxes should be paid and things like that. TikTok, all of a sudden, as it's about to go to Supreme Court, started to put in place, it looked like over the last couple of days, some checks and balances that if they probably had in place beforehand, maybe would have circumvented these issues. But it's, this is going to the U.S. Supreme Court on January 19th. And, it will be interesting to see. I don't know where I fall completely on this, because I do think that there are some shady business going on there. I don't think that they follow the same sort of, okay, let's put this in a different way. A Chinese company that's controlled by the Chinese government doesn't need to worry about profitability, where we see that in general, whether it be Facebook, X, Meta, these other ones, Instagram, that they still have a priority to their shareholders to produce revenue. So that they're going to do some things that are more, I want to say it correctly, that more are going to follow the guidelines and rules that we would like to see in place for social media, and just for how they're going to collect data and where that data is going to be used and how they send information to us, and how they sort of manipulate data. I do think TikTok had a big part to the sympathy that we saw towards Hamas, and some other things there were really led by some of this TikTok stuff. So I thought I was against it. I think I'm now for it. We'll see. We are about 1 minute from open here. I was thinking we might get a little bit of a rally here today before that news came out, before the Employment data came out. I am now more leaning towards we are going to see a meltdown throughout the morning here. So we'll see what we get. Excuse me. I'll take a look here at what's going on Twitter. We are open here, so let's see what we get. First thing is tick negative 851. So big move to the downside here on the tick as we hit open. Minus 600. Same thing, advanced decline minus 3626. That's a pretty big move to the downside here. Let's see if that moves here in the first couple of moments. But our first move across most things here has been to the downside at 830. Seeing news out of Bloomberg here, President-elect Donald Trump reportedly is considering declaring an economic emergency to impose tariffs. Man, well, tariffs. That is all we seem to be talking about here when we have it. Also seeing that China's central bank has halted bond buying as the yuan is struggling. We will definitely hit up our man, Mr. Flanagan, ask him what he's seeing there. And India's FX reserves have slumped to a 10-month low as the rupee pressure continues to mount. So seeing a lot of FX movement here and talk this morning across Twitter. So we will follow up with that at 10 o'clock with our man, Mr. Flanagan. And we are still moving to the downside, now down 1.09. So again, tick staying down about 620, 670 here. Still seeing more weakness cried upon it. Are seeing a move back up by Bitcoin and gold, though, on this news. So we are seeing a little bit of a flight to safety here. Most of the commodities are moving to the upside here. So now we're getting interesting when it comes to gas and oil here. Moved up tremendously on this news at 8:30 also. And now up, you see WTI breaking almost 77 here. Brent above 80 again. Big move up by gas and oil here today. Big move up by natural gas here today. Most of the commodities moving to the upside. Let's see what the Mag 7's doing. Wow. NVIDIA getting hit hard here now, down another 2.5% this morning. Netflix also getting hit pretty hard, down about 1.6. We do see Meta. Again, Meta is going to be a winner in that TikTok world, up about 0.6 of a percentage point. Google slightly up here. The rest of the Mag 7 on the downside. If we start to look at the indices across the spider, again, we see XLE and XLU, the only two sectors that are to the upside. Nice move up by UNG here, up 6.5%. Again, natural gas might be one. If it gets a little bit more of a bid here, might be one you could look to short, play the other side of that. DXY trying to move back up towards 110, it looks like here this morning. Tick still negative another 500. We've now gone advanced decline minus 4,000. Good morning, Zora. Hope you're having a good day today. VIX is moving to the upside here now, 19. We know, again, I talked about VIX when it was at 13 last week. If you needed protection, you buy it. When you don't need it, you buy it here, back here. Not now. So if anything, this is where you could sell future calls versus the VIX usually, although I would like to wait till it gets above 20 on that. Personally here, advanced decline staying under 4,000. We see the tick finally breaking below the negative 100 mark here, although now it just moved back above it. When I say above it, to the negative side, moving the wrong way here. Chinese stocks getting hit pretty hard today. BABA down about 2.2. JD down about 3.5%. So with the dollar surging here, we are seeing some moves down. I would have to think it's also all of this tariff talk again that's coming across today. Talk that the president-elect is maybe looking to use emergency powers to push those tariffs through as quick as possible. Again, markets are getting hit so far today pretty hard. Let's take a look here, see if they're still moving in that way. In shakers and movers, Walgreens continuing to move up about 21.3 here, hit a high of 11.24 today. So nice move up there again, Constellate, and that's on their earnings beats and the fact that they seem to be turning around the company there. So trying to make a move back up towards that 200-day MA. You might have room all the way to that 12.23 mark here on Walgreens this morning. Constellation Energy up over 20% here this morning. Glad to hear that there, Zora, on their news of buying Calpine, a private company heavily in the liquefied natural gas area, making them one of the, if not now, the largest U.S. Clean gas provider. Again, also airlines after Delta had good earnings, moving up tremendously. Look at that gap up here on Delta. It's bringing UAL with it. Not really as much. We did see for a while that Southwest was moving with it. Southwest, though, now you can see this last hour or so has retraced. So again, the big winners seem to be the big ones, Delta and UAL. Also seeing APA, which is another energy oil company. So the oil company is still moving up. One that's getting hit now that was up in the pre-market was Vista. Vista is a nuclear-based company in the nuclear utility side. It was moving up, but has definitely taken a drop back down. So we've definitely seen some sell the news there. We had seen a move up by a lot of the home builders like Lennar, but they have sold off a little bit here. Again, part of this, I think the fear with some of these home builders, or where you're running into problem there, is that they've been beat up so much that people are selling off into any kind of move to the upside here. So, that's what we're looking at. Occidental, Devon Energy. So a bunch of the energy companies moving to the upside. All of the energy companies getting hit pretty hard. Constellation Brands, again, the liquor, wine industry getting hit hard after bad earnings and talk of weakened consumer spending in the sector by the CEO of Constellation on their earnings call. That has them moving down. AMD moving down today on a downgrade here. Although I am seeing fact of the day that the Dutch government is negotiating with AMD to set up artificial intelligence facility in Netherlands, potentially boosting the AMD presence in the European market. Like I said, I might be a buyer of AMD here today for a bounce back. I do want to see how this day plays out, but I do think AMD is one that starts to get interesting here today at the 52-week low for me. I do think that they are a company that will start to come back. So we'll see what happens there. Let's take a look at what's going on in our pumpers here this morning. Big movers so far. Exchange, not that familiar with them. Vision Marine, which is one that's a pumper all the time. Verify Me. So we do see some of the general micro pumpers that I'll call them here are in the move this morning. Let's see if anything looks all that interesting. Oh, let me pull up my halts also. Let's see what we got on the halts. Sorry, I just logged out of it, so I gotta log back in. Give me 1 second here so I can see what we got going on in halts. And market movers. There we go. I see MODV on a halt. MODV. That's halted to the downside. We don't care about that. That's about all we got so far. NEHC. Let's check that out. NEHC. New Era Helium. Stop to the downside also. So far, nothing really stopped to the upside. Doesn't look like. XTIA. So it's the first day in a while too. I'm not seeing any of these morning pumpers. Yeah, everything to the downside. Nothing really up over 100%. Biggest mover to the upside so far. XHG right about that 100% mark. Struggling to hold at it. So where we've seen a lot of these 200, 300% movers, we haven't seen much so far this morning in that way. S&P now down 744.10, down almost 7/10 of a percentage point. NASDAQ 100 down 1 percentage point here. So again, continuing to see weakness across the market, getting a little bit of a pullback on WBA here on Walgreens after that big move up. Let's take a look at the Mag 7. NVIDIA now down 3.5%, continuing to get hit hard here. Apple down 1.84, so the mag getting hit real hard here. If we look at the tick, this is a beat down. 365, 400. We're down now 1.28 on QQQ. SPY down 1%. Bitcoin is holding around that 93,500 area pretty well, but not doing much. Gold does look like commodities are sort of starting to slow down here and normalize. Let's take a quick look at what's going on across treasuries. Treasuries have actually moved back down a little bit, so they're not taking off. So it does look like everything's just sort of moving to the downside here over the last 10 minutes or so since we've opened. Not a lot moving to the upside that I'm seeing here. And again, we're seeing even a bigger move to the downside. We are seeing XLV, which is healthcare, moving to the upside, but that's going to be led by what we saw by Walgreens mostly, if I had a guess there. Let's take a look. I do think I have a healthcare. I do. Actually, healthcare in general moving to the upside. We see UNH up about 2%, Elevate up 1.26, Cigna up about 0.59, ACA up 7/8 of a percentage point, Merck up about 1/4 of a point. CVS on that Walgreens move also getting sympathy play. So it does look like today's a day for healthcare to move to the upside. Mostly healthcare moving to the upside so far. Restaurants on that news from Constellation in general moving to the downside. SG, which I'm not that Sweet Green, the only one that I'm seeing move the other way there, really. McDonald's slightly up. Banks getting hit again. We're seeing foreign banks are doing pretty well today, led by Bank Santander, HSBC, UBS. So some of the foreign banks are doing better. BBVA out of Argentina. So U.S. banks again to the downside. JP Morgan 242. Just trying to see here what we got. You know, after it sort of filled that gap back down to the downside, it's done a pretty good job here of holding above the 50-day MA when it comes to JP Morgan. Not a bad little hold there. E-commerce getting hit pretty hard across the board here, except for Walmart having a nice day and Costco. So Walmart, Costco, Target all having nice days. You know, Target's the one that I made that mistake. I called that out when it made that gap down. I asked everybody. No one seemed to be that interested in Target when it was down in that 120 area, except for me. It has bounced back. Nicely. I allowed peer pressure to get me on that one because I did think on that drop down that Target was is still a good buy. What else are we seeing here? Tick still on the negative here. Man, I haven't seen a positive tick yet so far. Advanced decline now at 4,400 to the downside. Wow, that's one of the biggest ones we've seen so far since we've been on the air. And we see, you know, NASDAQ down 1.2% here. What's really getting hit, small caps down 1.77% here. Does the rut start to become a buy here in this area? Does have some pretty good support in that 2160 area. So could be at a level that the rut starts to get interesting here. Bitcoin back above 94. I want to see if gold can get above 27 here today. You can see it got as high as 2693 I think a move above 27 tries to send it back up to that 27.50 spot. Gas, man, gas prices are going to be high at the pumps coming up. We are looking at 76. Remember that just recently we were down in the mid 60s here on WTI. Hey, see one of my favorites on a stop here, LAES, which we know is seals. One of my favorite micro pumpers here, trying to move back to the upside. Just halted at 602. That's an interesting one because you definitely got room back up here towards that 650. This is always a good pumper. Again, this is semiconductor play, LAES. What are we looking at volume here? About 17 million in volume. They normally do 70, so it's not a huge volume here. So this one is interesting because if you do see a volume spike, could see a nice move to the upside here. Tick is finally gone positive here after being down so much. We are seeing a positive move on the VIX, seeing advanced decline start to hit from that bottom at 4,500 back to 42 here. Bitcoin moving up nicely here, 94,500. So we are seeing a move to the upside there. Mag 7 starting to see a move back up by NVIDIA here, regain the 136 handle now. Apple back at 238. We do see Amazon has gone negative, and so has Meta, though. Tesla now the one moving to the upside here, slightly positive. Netflix getting hit harder here this morning, down almost 3%. So definitely seeing a mixed bag here, but mostly things down on the negative side. And tick starting to move back down to the negative here. So it looks like that little quick move to the upside might be getting sold off here. It does look like that. Looks like any kind of strength here is being sold off pretty quickly. We'll say Walgreens, though, moving back still up. Constellation still moving up. Delta still moving up. So some of the big winners here earlier this morning are still moving to the upside. Seeing what's coming off across Twitter. Seeing across from Reuters here, Britain's gas storage levels are worryingly low. So that's why nat gas probably moving up tremendously. That's good for those nat gas companies, maybe good for UNG here. Do see on the worldwide front here some positive news. India's industrial output at a 6-month high of 5.2% year-over-year growth. So a little bit of good news out of India. We talked a little bit earlier here today about how their rupee is not doing well at all. Also seeing some good news here out of the U.S., where a new U.S. port strike has been averted as the union representing 45,000 dock workers on the East and Gulf Coast said it reached a tentative deals with employers on a new 6-year contract. So it's good to see that moving the right way. Again, most of the news has been based upon the strong employment data this morning. That seems to be the main thing. See if any other new news kicking across. Not really. Do see news from Bloomberg here, Walter Bloomberg, that Canada's Foreign Minister Jolly will not run for the Liberal leadership race. He was expected. Also seeing that Nicolas Maduro was sworn in for his 3rd term as a Venezuelan president/dictator. Seeing breaking news from CBS that TikTok says it does plan to shut down the site of TikTok unless the Supreme Court strikes down the law forcing it to sell. So they are playing hardball from their side. They are not going to fight dance, saying they're not going to sell, that they will just take it black. So we'll see if they follow through on that. It does look like a little bit of a chicken game there between the U.S. regulators. And we see the tick again, negative 300. So definitely not seeing strength. Advanced decline back above 4,500 here to the downside. When I say that, back up, back down, negative 4,598, negative 4,600. So now moving even further to the downside. And we do see NASDAQ now down 1.5 percentage points. The RUT down 1.8%. I don't even have to look at it, but I was about to say you can tell the Mag 7s are all going to be down tremendously. And we see NVIDIA down almost 4%, Netflix down 3% now. We see Apple almost down 2%. So it is a bloodbath across the Mag 7 here today. That's about what I'm seeing so far. Okay, well, we are about 20 minutes in here, and it is still moving to the downside. Not seeing a lot of positivity anywhere you can really pick in the market so far. You know, even like I said, even with this move down by stocks and equities, we aren't seeing the huge move up by the commodities. They have sort of, maxed, no, I won't say maxed out, but they sort of seem to have hit their daily highs. Bitcoin dropping back down right around the 94K level. Gold still not able to break above that 27 yet, although it does look like it's trying to get up to 2,700. Silver is above the $30.50 side, so we'll see there. And that gas has moved back down here a little bit even this morning. So that first move up by all these commodities starting to maybe get sold off a little bit. DXY, though, has continued to move to the upside now after coming down a little bit at 109.56 or so. And we can see almost a half a point move to the downside on the euro, the sterling. So we will talk with Mr. Flanagan about that. We do see a little bit of strength in Canada and Mexico here today. We know those currencies have been beaten down pretty hard. And again, most of everything getting hit hard here. Let's take a look and see. Do see Walgreens, Constellation, Delta now up 11%, United up 5%, Katera Energy. So the energy companies, like we talked about, and CVS and some of the healthcare now starting to get a little bit of positivity. I guess that's also what's pushing Target today. Walgreens, Target, very similar footprint in a lot of the different urban areas. So that definitely moving to the same type of move there. Valero Energy to the upside. Lidos, one of the ones that have been beat down. Lidos Energy moving to the upside here, about 2.55%. Again, energy moving up here. Occidental has some of the others. Towards the downside, biggest losers on the day, Constellation Brands, as we talked about, down about 8%. Pacific Gas and Electric, obviously with everything going on with the wildfires, down about 7.87%. AMD on that downgrade, now down 5.47%. I've talked about it. Apple Oven, another one that had been moving way up before, up about 5%, down about 5% here. So we definitely see that. You see some of the real estate companies, CBRE, again, getting hurt from what we've seen in the wildfires. The other area definitely getting hit here pretty hard too. Temu Parent company PDD down about 4%. We talked about that. BABA was down pretty big also. So we are seeing that across. We'll point out Palantir down at 66.10 here. Palantir continuing to move to the downside. Seeing a little bit of private equity getting hit here today. Not 100% sure why that is. I saw Apollo, KKR all moving down here today. So we are seeing just across the board. Yeah, here you go. Apollo down 3.17%. Here this morning. Cincinnati Financial Corp down 3.21%. So some of these are getting hit. Also, KKR down 3.78%. Semiconductor down 4.6. So continuing to see, hits across the board here. Not a lot of positivity in the market. Let's take one last look here. Tick still negative, almost 400 here. QQQ down 1.5 percentage points. SPY down 1.2. Dow Jones almost down 1% at this point. The RUT down 1.74, and the RUI or RUI down 1.2. Bitcoin broke back below 94K here. Gold sticking right around that 2690 level. Trying to see if just any of the normal ones that I watch, what's moving, anything else moving one way or the other. Again, all of the Chinese names down. Bitcoin mining company is moving to the downside. I'm surprised MSTR MicroStrategy actually holding up pretty well here at 330. Micron down another 1.46%. Neo down 2%. Nike having some headwinds today, up about 1.26 to the upside. NVIDIA down at 135 here, so continuing to get hit pretty hard. SMCI up on the upside, 1.84. Snapchat up 1.83. So some of the other social media companies that maybe will be a beneficiary of the TikTok shutting down if they do that. Tesla, which had been up just a few minutes ago, now down 1.53%. So again, we just see, these sell-offs are harsh, man, when they start to hit. Wells Fargo now down 2% here this morning. BlackRock down 1.85. So financial service industry getting hit pretty hard here too. Tick still down another 152. And again, almost 4,700 stocks in the negative here today on the U.S. 46.89. That's the biggest I've seen in a while. Quite honestly, I don't know that since COVID I've seen it that high, quite honestly. So that is a beat down. We do see VIX trying to get up, as I said, and once it starts to get up above 20 is where I start to try to look to maybe short that. So at 1924, we got in VIX, and when I say short it, either buy some puts or sell calls, against the current price. So we'll see where we're at here. We are about 957 right now. Those of you who like the Italian beefsteaks, Portillo's out of Chicago up nicely today, 9.6, up about 4.34%. Trying to see if there's any news there. Not really. I do like Portillo's. They charge too much, though. I do see our man, Mr. Flanagan himself, has come into the building. It's going to take me. We do have a new system here. Let's see if I get this to work. Hey, I actually look like I almost know what I'm doing. Mr. Flanagan, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Howard. Quite the day. A little bit opposite a reaction that I had anticipated, but December payrolls, it's kind of a roll of the dice as to which statistical quirk is going to affect it. So, but clearly, you're looking at a U.S. economy that is a stand-alone in the currency markets.
Yeah, I mean that is definitely what you'd have to say, right? It's a haves and haves nots, and right now we're the have, and it doesn't look like anybody else is in that market. The only other thing that I saw that was moving in the positive direction, so to speak, a little bit was European banks, Bank Santander,
Santander rather, HSBC out of Hong Kong, a couple of the others. But in general, I don't think I've seen a day, as I mentioned just recently since COVID, we've got like 4,700 stocks to the downside on the advanced decline today.
That's right. Today's, kind of what we would refer to, it's a bloodletting day. It's, you've got a new data and everybody's got to readjust their models accordingly. And while it shows a tremendous amount of strength in the U.S. economy, it puts the Fed on hold. But, I think in a broader look, we have to get by. Equities can go up only if the Fed's cutting rates. The economy clearly is doing quite well at a 4.5% to 5% 10-year, which is not really having a drag to the economy. And it is economic growth that will drive eventually. But right now, models are readjusting, and that really is what's going, I think, on today.
Well, and I think, like you said, what happened is the algorithms moved to the downside, and it spooked retail with it. So what we're seeing today is that exasperation of it, right? Where
Exactly.
First the models started moving, and like you said, money moves first, and those algorithms started moving, and it sent everybody into panic. Because all we've heard, right, is tariffs today. Trump came out and said that he'll use emergency powers maybe to pass these tariffs, and we see what that did to China. I mean, all of the Chinese stocks got drilled at 5% down, most of them today, which I do think gives a buying opportunity. You've talked about it a little bit. I brought it up earlier. Might be a time to look at MCSI or one of those buckets that have that for some stimulus to get announced, because China doesn't like to be on the downside versus the U.S. economy, right?
That's correct. And, we did have an economic release out of China where inflation is yet weakening again towards zero. So the warning bells are sounding for China in the sense that deflation is beginning to take hold. Now, all China needs to do is look at the 25-year battle that Japan had to understand to get out of that spiral is incredibly difficult. So I am expecting, and you did see some Chinese officials making comments last night about economic stimulus in the pipeline. I think it's just a matter of President Xi just basically saying, look, get it done, because it's starting to look a little bit bad. So I agree with you that this is a level to begin to look at selective companies that you've wanted in your buying list, because the eventually, in a shorter term, I do anticipate a turnaround in China.
Yep, I'm with you there. Like I said, it's not something maybe to hold forever. It's one of those, though, to get that little bump. I compare it, as you know, to the meme coins in crypto. When Musk puts a Doge, puts a Shibu, his dog or something on, a tweet, the next thing you know is just it makes the 5 to 10% move to the upside. And that's what I'm looking for, a quick little pump out of it, and I'll get out. But I do think that we're hitting those spots here for that. You've mentioned DXY to 115. This looks like it could be the impotence that starts to send us to that level, right?
Well, we've been talking about this since 101, about this dollar index and the entire market chasing this move. Because in my 40 plus years of trading in the currency markets, every forecast always talks about the dollar will go lower. The dollar will go lower because of a variety of economic reasons. Number one is the deficit and the amount of debt the United States has. However, at these levels here, with the Dixie trading 109.5, you're now looking at a point in time where people are saying we're now above all the levels that we had talked about. And you're looking at targeting in the October 22 highs of around 115. Beyond there, or the September highs, beyond that level, though, I'm sorry, you can throw a dart, because I traded in a market when the Dixie would have hypothetically been at around a 165 level.
Right.
So it is very possible the present economic backdrop, the world. Now, when you talk currencies, you've got to step back and take that macro view. We're
Absolutely.
looking at a world right now where the United States is a standout in economic performance and strength. A number of people have already come out talking about the amount of investment that's moving into our treasury market as yields have pumped up and touched 5%. That's a stronger dollar. So this is a situation here that the new administration is suddenly going to have to deal with. You're talking tariffs, but the dollar is going up. You could almost put yourself out of business if the dollar continues to spiral up, higher.
Right. Exactly. We won't be able to afford to buy anything. Well, you'll have, the strong dollar will be great, but the tariff, you're getting into this paradox world where I don't think we've seen it for a while, or if ever. I also thought it was interesting. You see China announced they're not going to be bond buyers for a little while here in the U.S.
I'm sure that is a little diplomatic, poof.
Spike. That's why I always ask you. You're the guy that has been watching this for 40 years, not me. I can get drawn into these little hype, things that they'll put out there. But I was wondering if that was more there. I also saw more struggles. Well, good news out of India, bad news out of India. Good news in that it looks like their industrial machine starting to move in the right direction up. I think it was 5% over year. But the rupee just getting destroyed.
Yes, they're in a tough situation. Still, a lot of that Adani is rolling and playing out through the market. I have India on my investment list as far as a currency play, but not yet. That's kind of, I go Japan, China, India, Europe. Europe is not even on my radar right now. And the UK.
After we saw in Germany, and I mean, come on, again, more bad news out of Germany overnight.
Right. And, we have to look at this. We're in a very precarious position when you play the currency markets here, because the next central bank meeting is not until the end of January. And so you basically go, Bank of Japan is up on January 24th. A lot of chatter. We could talk about the yen. I love the yen. That's my play. You've gone up to 158.5 roughly. But it looks like Japan may move the needle here and make an interest rate move, because inflation and growth are beginning to come back to where the data that they said is a prerequisite for a rate move. So I'm looking at Japan at possibly surprising the markets here, January 24th. But to my point, the Fed doesn't meet until January 29th. Bank of Canada on the 29th, ECB on the 30th. So you've got a window of 2.5 weeks here where a lot of data is going to come out, and it would look as if the U.S. is going to maintain strength. Europe and the UK are going to be cratering before their central banks can get in and lower rates.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're looking at. And what I'll point out is, last time Japan, actually moved their rates, I believe was this July, right? And when it was up in this 160, and, we saw it come back down to the 140 level. Would you be looking at it more to return to the 150 level, or do you think that you do see that type of move and we see a bigger move to the downside?
Well, the move you highlighted is what you call the hammer. That's
right.
Bank of Japan's intervention. After warning the markets about 160, the Bank of Japan came in. Market estimates are, in the high 10 to 20 billion dollars of intervention. When they come in, it comes in with a hammer. And
they don't play around.
You can see that resulting move, right?
Yeah.
So look at the tops that we're putting in right here in our, let's say, last 5. Yes, exactly.
Very similar. That's what I mean, is I'm looking at it. It's not quite to the height that we saw at 160, but do they say, I'm not letting it get that far? You can see they hit that 150. It's sort of self-regulated on itself. The market structure kind of came in. And then once it broke through that 150, they said, we've got to bring that hammer in, like you said, and did it. So I'm starting to look on any kind of move to the upside towards 160 that you'd probably see that kind of move again, right?
I would expect that. And I think if Japan surprises the market, what they have this time around is they have a reason to change their monetary policy. Keep in mind, Japan is at a 0.25% interest rate.
Right.
While the world is going inflation, Japan is like, we want
We
inflation.
need it. Yeah. Can you please raise our prices?
And so is China now.
Yeah. You know, it's funny too. I will point out the longer for higher for longer and all that. I mentioned to my wife this morning, I said, oh, there go rates. We didn't forget that refinance that we talked about, you know, because we have one free refinance on because we bought a new home during a year ago. And I said, babes, well, we're just not going to get it. And she was asking, you know, what I meant. And I showed her and I just said, listen, you know, we're getting to a point where a 5%, 4.5% mortgage like we have is going to be a good rate for a mortgage. You know, we're just, you know, I think it's just taking longer for the U.S. retail trader to realize the new normal, right? What the market is.
Exactly. And when you look at a 4.5%, 5% interest rate, and then back up and take a historical look, these are low rates.
Yeah.
From a historical point of view, my first mortgage was at 14.5%. So,
right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's, you know, the difference, as we all know, is that the inflation on homes versus labor, you know, versus wages have moved that so far out. But yeah, I mean, this isn't an area that, you know, like I said, like you said, my parents would have been thrilled back in the day to have a 5% mortgage.
that's correct. And so I do believe that the downside in interest rates is about 3 to 3.5% on any move. But the prevailing logic that the U.S. can remain insulated from the economic downturn in the world is in a bigger term, in a longer term view. And I mean longer term, 3 to 6 to 9 months. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
It will affect the U.S.
It spills over.
Interest rates here are not going to keep going up. This is a level because you have to factor in the economic balances in the world. It's a giant seesaw. And right now you've got it this way with the U.S., you know, up here with higher interest rates and growth, and the world going this way. Eventually, what's going to happen as the new administration comes in, it will be beholden to the rest of the world to begin to make interest rate moves and economic stimulus moves to balance the seesaw again. So the U.S. will begin to moderate. And that's what I would say in a 3 to 9 month horizon.
Now, do you think Davos will have anything will help with this process at all? You know, we know that all those big wigs all start to get together in Zurich and have their, you know, hot toddies and look at the lovely mountains in a week or so. Do we start to see some coordination come out of that? Do we start to see, you know, because like you've said, one of the biggest things has been this disconnect between the different markets and the interest rates between the central bankers. Are they going to get on the same page?
As far as, you know, first we got the World Economic Forum there. So, yes, I would imagine you'll hear a lot of whining and crying that, you know, this is not fair that the United States is doing this, and you guys have to do something to help the rest of the world out. I would fully expect that type of comments to come out of a number of these officials. And what you'll see is a response back because, you know, you're going to have Trump in office. The U.S. is doing right. The U.S. is doing everything. We are driving the locomotive.
Yeah.
And the rest of it. That's right. So get out of the caboose and come on up into the front of the train and you'll have a better view. So it's going to be, you know, a lot of, you know, whining that goes on there about what the globalists have in mind for the world. And it is totally disconnected today.
Yeah, I'll also be interested because we haven't heard much from our friends, Mr. Diamond, Mr. Fink, Mr. Griffin, you know, the sort of triumphant of, you know, talking heads that tend to move the markets, right? I mean, those three guys, when it comes to the financial world, really start to do it. And I'll be interested because we've seen this pullback in DEI that had been such a huge part of their focus at the last Davos, at Bretton Woods, at all these, you know, economic forum places. What is the talk this year?
Well, it's certainly not going to be DEI. I would imagine that will not be the topic, and I would expect the individuals you've mentioned to probably begin to toe the line. After all, their core business is here in the United States, and they
Absolutely.
see very well what's going on. And if anything, I would be looking for a little bit of a shocker from them in the sense that, hey, Europe, hey, England, you guys got to get your economic houses in order.
Right.
It's time to start getting aggressive and making some changes, and I would expect that type of talk to come from them.
Yeah, that's what I think we're going to see personally. I'm with you. I think that they're gonna put the sort of foot on the neck, so to speak, and say, hey, if you want more investment from us here in Europe, then you need to fix this anemic GDP in every country. We need to start, fixing, the infrastructure and this and that, because they don't have it in place. Why would they spend their money there right now?
Precisely, and what these individuals will see is they will see the emerging market debt, and they will see the amount of money that emerging market countries are having to pay to finance their dollar denominated debt.
Right.
Just as in the US, as interest rates go up, so does our interest rate payments on our debt, but it affects more, your emerging market that has gone pretty deep into dollar debt. So they will see that picture, and that's where the warning signs will come, that we've got to address this imbalance in the seesaw if we want prosperity to be spread throughout the world.
Absolutely, and we've seen it. I'm, as you know, me with my Bitcoin standard for things. We've seen what El Salvador has been able to do by getting off the dollar as much as they could. They couldn't replace it, but by supplementing it and doing that, because as we talk about, a strong dollar is good for the U.S. maybe, but it isn't necessarily good for these other countries that don't get the benefits that we get, from it, and that becomes a problem.
One nuance from early trading days in my career, back when the Volcker interest rates were going on, was a stronger dollar was also a great weapon against higher inflation. So
right, because we're buying all the raw goods in our own dollar.
That's right. So watch for a dampening effect on inflation. Perhaps January doesn't show it, but as we go February, March, and April, watch for the inflation dampening throughout the world to start occurring. And
Yeah,
then
people don't realize that.
exactly. And then the ignition starts once again as people start saying, right now, everybody's afraid of inflation, but I would have to say the majority of people that are trading in the market have no understanding about, a 2.5%, 2.8% inflation is not a bad thing.
Right.
If you've got economic growth.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. As long as we grow at 3%, then that inflation at 2.8 is okay.
Right.
And especially if we grow at 5, then that inflation, you're doubling it. So again, we're moving in the right direction, not the wrong direction. And it's one of those things that's an unintended consequence that they form themselves, these countries, especially Europe, right? For years, they used the franc and the African version of the franc as a way for them to get all of that resources at a cheaper rate. And what they're getting is the unintended consequences. As our dollar rises, it means even China, that wants to send us, that we get a lot of our raw materials from, it becomes cheaper for us. So it's a win for us. That's what people don't realize with inflation.
Yep. It does. If you have growth, it's okay to have, and again, what I come back to is, by the way, who decided 2% was this economic, this inflation magnet? Who decided that 2% was and not 2.5%? I have no, and this is why I feel our monetary authorities are just so disconnected to the world. I mean, if you heard Janet Yellen the other day actually have an admission that, well, maybe the stimulus that we did early on helped cause inflation. I mean,
maybe
you were a central banker in charge of the Fed for a very long period of time. How could you say maybe?
Yeah, I mean, what's scary is as you look back over the last 4 years, what we've seen has just been a complete failure by the government. I mean, there's no other way to talk about it. From these cabinet positions, look what they did to financial innovation just in general. Look what they've done with mergers and acquisitions. I don't know if you saw Lena Khan on CNBC. She wouldn't admit that she's made any mistakes in the last 4 years.
That's right.
Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's on her side, is definitely a left-leaning Democrat. And he even just stopped the interview and basically said, I'm going to stop here. You do realize that when the vice president went on Oprah and said that, again, we've done nothing wrong, everything is great, that's where she lost. How do you now go back and say the same thing? You're doubling down.
I think this is the core problem that exists in the world. So Davos will be a very fun thing to watch from my point of view. It is the lack of real market education that these officials throughout the world possess. I've done nothing wrong. I wouldn't change anything. Are you kidding me?
We were wrong for looking at it badly.
So,
they almost point the finger. You don't understand.
That's right. And this is a very an Achilles heel of the academic approach to monetary policy. And all the people underneath of my decision making, which is the populace,
yep.
Well, you've got to just grin and bear it because, this is what the textbook says. We don't think we did it. But this is why the populist movement throughout the world
taken over.
It's growing everywhere.
Yeah.
In Germany, you've got elections next month. France toppled the government, and they're going to get toppled again. In the UK, look at the swing from a landslide election of Labour. They're now on the outs. In Canada, Trudeau is on the. So all over, the populist movement is growing simply because of that response in their economic.
That's what I mean. Is that's what's upset me more than anything else has been the attitude. It reminded me, and it's just been exasperated. It's the same thing that everyone pointed when Trump wouldn't admit to some of his mistakes.
Right.
When he left office, and it upset everybody. And they're doing it, and they're doubling down and tripling down. It was. I remember at the time when when Biden won and they said, okay, this is the chance. And you could see they didn't grab that chance right off the bat. They, instead of being putting their hands across the aisle and say, we're going to work together and this is what we're going to try to do. They just went, we've got we've got a mandate and this is where we're going. Just hasn't worked for anybody, either side at any point so far in the last 20 years, in my opinion, since Reagan.
Yep. And, let's see what happened. But we're in this interim period. And no central banks till end of January, early February. The new president's coming. So this is like an interim period. And that's why markets are beginning to come unhinged because everybody's trying to guess what the next move's going to be. Let's look at the last data point was this morning, a very strong unemployment number. Unemployment rate came down. I'm sure if you slice and dice that number, it's going to have some imperfections in it. But the new data point is causing markets to have to evaluate and trade. And so I expect volatility to continue for the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Hey, we're going to end on that note, Mr. Flanagan. I agree with you. Volatility. Make sure you have some powder dry on the sidelines to buy some of these dips. And be nimble. Again, as you said, Jack, be nimble. Jack, be quick. Don't get caught on that candlestick.
Yes,
be ready to sell. Steve's been big on that lately. Don't be afraid to leave a few pennies on the table and take that profit before that profit. All you got to do is look today. Tesla at one point was up almost 0.5 percentage point. Now probably down close to 2 if I look at it. 1.52. So, waiting nowadays right now is not the idea. It's got to be nimble. You got to take that profit and, trade that thesis.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. We will see you on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. I'm happy. Hey, I was waiting for us to crash out with our new system here. Worked pretty well. I thought I don't have to wear those crazy headphones anymore that always zoom out on us. And I was excited to get this new system out and working. Just so you know, Mr. Flanagan, we are also streaming live on X Spaces and LinkedIn today. So we are now in all 3 locations here on Quasar Markets Live, and our new education model and web module and web platform will be kicking off next week, and we'll be showing that here. I think you'll be very excited to see all the upgrades.
Looking forward to it, because the world of foreign exchange is a great world to trade within, but we've just got to keep our risk management tight, and those are things that I can discuss in that education part.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on Monday.
Okay, have a great weekend.
You too.